March 12, 1908, 3:14 a.m. The biting wind tore through my fur coat, the kind with a wolf's pelt collar that scratched my neck raw. It was a small price to pay to feel a semblance of warmth in this desolate city. Krasnoyarsk, Siberia. A name that whispered of frozen nightmares and whispered secrets the wind carried from the endless taiga. I, Dr. Anya Petrova, shouldn't have been here. A woman, a doctor, in this god-forsaken land where progress crawled on its belly. Yet, here I was, huddled in the back of a rickety carriage pulled by a skeletal horse that wheezed like a consumptive man. My destination, the infamous Starry Gates Sanatorium, a place shrouded in more mysteries than the Northern Lights. A telegram, cryptic and urgent, had summoned me, my estranged grandfather, a renowned psychiatrist, requesting my help. Help with what? The message hadn't said. Just come, urgency at most. The city itself mirrored the telegram's tone, a brooding skeletal silhouette against the star-dusted night. We lumbered past crooked houses that seemed to shrink from the cold, their windows glowing a sickly yellow. On the cobbled streets, figures moved like wraiths, faces obscured by frost-laden scarves. Even the barking of the occasional stray dog sounded like a hollow cry against the oppressive silence. The driver, a wiry man with a perpetually worried frown, finally broke the bone-chilling silence. "You sure about this, Doc?" he rasped, his voice barely audible over the clattering hooves. "I have no choice," I replied, my breath forming a plume of white smoke in the frigid air. He grunted and focused on navigating the treacherous path. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the occasional jolt of the carriage and the growing light in the eastern sky. As dawn approached, the cityscape gave way to a desolate expanse of snow-covered plains that stretched endlessly towards a horizon painted with the fiery hues of sunrise. Then, in the distance, a solitary structure materialized from the white canvas. It was the Starry Gates Sanatorium, a sprawling Gothic monstrosity that looked more like a neglected fortress than a place of healing. Turrets jutted up like skeletal fingers, and the windows, countless and dark, seemed to stare at us with 1,000 empty eyes. As we drew closer, the sanatorium's imposing scale became even more apparent. Gargoyles with grotesque expressions leered from the facade, and the large oak door at the main entrance looked heavy enough to bar the entrance of an army. The carriage came to a stop with a groan in front of the colossal door. I stepped out, legs numb from the cold, and gazed up at the building. An oppressive sense of foreboding washed over me, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. Taking a deep breath, I approached the door and raised a heavy iron knocker shaped like a snarling wolf's head. The metal echoed with a dull thud that resonated like a death knell through the empty courtyard. Silence. I rapped again, this time harder. Still, no answer. Just the mournful cry of a raven circling the highest turret. A wave of doubt washed over me. Was this all a mistake? A cruel prank by a colleague jealous of my growing reputation? As I contemplated retreating, a sound, a muffled shuffling, reached my ears from behind the door. A moment later, a sliver of wood creaked open, revealing a single rheumy eye peering out. Who is it?" A voice, hoarse and raspy, rasped from the other side. "Dr. Anya Petrova," I replied, my voice firm despite the chill crawling down my spine. "I'm here to see Dr. Dmitry Volkov." The eye narrowed further. Then, a sigh, heavy with weariness, escaped the unseen figure. "Wait," it croaked. The sliver of wood slammed shut, leaving me alone again in the oppressive silence. The raven landed on a nearby gargoyle, its black eyes gleaming as if mirroring the darkness brewing within the sanatorium's walls. Moments stretched into agonizing minutes. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat against the backdrop of the howling wind. Had I made a terrible mistake? Suddenly, the door creaked open again, this time revealing a stooped figure cloaked in a dark, threadbare robe. His face, etched with deep wrinkles and framed by a long white beard, looked both weathered and weary. "Dr. Petrova," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Welcome to Starry Gates." The old man, my grandfather, ushered me inside, The air within the sanatorium was stale and heavy, thick with the smell of dust and something else, a metallic tang that pricked at the back of my throat. Dim light filtered through dusty stained glass windows, casting grotesque shadows that danced on the walls. The grand entrance hall, once opulent by the looks of it, was now a cluttered mess. Stacks of dusty medical journals and overflowing ashtrays littered a chipped marble table, and a moth-eaten rug with a faded floral pattern lay crumpled on the cold stone floor. "Welcome, Anya," my grandfather rasped, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Forgive the disarray. Times have been difficult." He gestured for me to follow him, and we entered a labyrinthine corridor. The air grew colder, and the flickering gaslights cast an unsettling yellow glow. The walls were adorned with portraits of stern-faced doctors in long coats, their eyes seeming to follow us as we passed. "Where are the other staff?" I couldn't help but ask, the silence broken only by the echoing sound of our footsteps. He paused, his hand resting on a heavy oak door. "Gone," he said simply. "All gone." My unease deepened. Gone. Where did they go? And why? The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit office. A single desk cluttered with papers and vials filled with an ominous dark liquid dominated the room. A threadbare armchair sat opposite the desk, and a chaise longue, its leather cracked and peeling, lay near a dusty window. "This was my workspace," my grandfather said, his voice strained. "Please sit." He gestured towards the armchair, and I sank into it cautiously. My gaze fell on a framed photograph on the desk, a younger version of my grandfather, his face kind and his eyes full of life, standing next to a woman with auburn hair and a warm smile. "My mother," I realized with a pang. "You look surprised," my grandfather rasped, following my gaze. I never knew you had a wife," I admitted, the words catching in my throat. He sighed, a deep, weary sound. We were married for many years, but tragedy struck. Your mother, she succumbed to illness." His voice cracked, and a flicker of pain crossed his face, a stark contrast to the cold, distant man I had always known. Guilt gnawed at me. All these years I had judged him for his aloofness, never realizing the burden he carried. "But, that doesn't explain why you called me here," I said, trying to steer the conversation back on track. My grandfather looked at me, his gaze intense. "This sanatorium, it's not what it once was," he began, his voice low. "We treated difficult cases, patients with, unusual afflictions." He paused, his eyes searching mine. "They called them the Starborn, people touched by something beyond our understanding." A shiver ran down my spine. Starborn? It sounded like something out of a fantastical tale, not a medical institution. "What kind of afflictions?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with a desperate intensity. They saw things, heard things. Things no man should ever witness." He gestured towards a locked cabinet behind his desk. "The files. They detail their experiences, horrors beyond comprehension." My heart hammered in my chest. This was madness. Yet the urgency in my grandfather's voice, the haunted look in his eyes chilled me to the bone. "What happened to the Starborn?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping. They changed, became something else, a threat, and I had to act. A horrifying realization dawned on me. The metallic tang in the air, the missing staff. You killed them?" I stammered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My grandfather didn't answer. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a bottomless despair. "But there has to be another way," I pleaded, desperation rising in my voice. He shook his head slowly. "There wasn't. They were beyond saving, consumed by the darkness." Silence descended, thick and heavy. The air crackled with unspoken words and a terrifying truth. My grandfather, the renowned psychiatrist, had become a monster in the name of saving lives. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. It echoed through the corridor. The scream originated from the floor above. It was inhuman, filled with a primal terror that sent shivers down my spine. My grandfather lurched towards the door, his face a mask of dread. "Stay here," he rasped, his voice raw. "Don't let anything come in." He slammed the door shut, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence of his office. The scream echoed again, closer this time, followed by a frantic pounding on the locked cabinet. Curiosity. Battling fear, I crept towards it, my hand hovering over the ornately carved handle. "Help me!" A voice pleaded from within, raspy and desperate. "It's here, the Starborn. It's gotten loose." The words ignited a spark of defiance within me. I couldn't let my grandfather face this alone, whatever horrors awaited him. Taking a deep breath, I retrieved a heavy paperweight from the desk and used it to smash the lock on the cabinet. Inside, crammed haphazardly, were leather-bound journals filled with disturbing sketches and frantic scribblings. I shoved them aside, my gaze falling on a small silver vial filled with a glowing blue liquid. My heart pounded in my chest, an experimental treatment my grandfather mentioned in passing. Could this be the solution we needed? Just then, the door burst open. My grandfather stumbled through, his face pale and sweat-streaked. Behind him, a grotesque figure emerged from the shadows. Tall and emaciated, its pale skin stretched taut over bones, it had eyes that glowed with an eerie, eldritch light. My grandfather slammed the door shut and lunged for a heavy brass poker lying by the fireplace. The creature howled, a sound that ripped through the room like a banshee's wail, and lunged at him. Without a second thought, I grabbed the vial and hurled it at the creature. The blue liquid splashed across its chest, sizzling and causing it to recoil with a shriek. It writhed in pain, the glow in its eyes flickering. Seizing this opportunity, my grandfather swung the poker, connecting solidly with the creature's skeletal head. It let out a guttural roar and crumpled to the floor, unmoving. We stood, gasping for breath. The silence in the wake of the struggle, an almost deafening counterpoint to the earlier chaos. Slowly, I approached the fallen creature, a morbid curiosity replacing the initial terror. Its skin, devoid of the blue liquid, looked strangely lifeless. "Is it dead?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My grandfather nodded, his face etched with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "For now," he rasped. "But the Starborn, they are drawn to this place. It will be back." He looked at me, his gaze searching. "We have work to do, Anya. Not just containing the darkness, but understanding it, finding a permanent cure." I looked at the vial still clutched in my hand, the blue liquid shimmering faintly. Perhaps my arrival at Starry Gates wasn't a mistake after all. Maybe together, we could find a way to heal not just the Starborn, but the darkness that plagued this place and the shadows within ourselves.